There comes a point in many relationships when things go quiet, not with shouting or a dramatic end, but with a soft silence that somehow says everything. It doesn't arrive all at once. It seeps in gradually, like how shadows stretch across a room when the sun shifts. You notice it in small ways before you truly see it. Love at the beginning often feels magical. We enter it with open hearts, hungry for connection, for someone to choose us, see us, and want us. But the wonder of new love doesn't always last. Over time, that rush either deepens into something more grounded, or it flattens into repetition. For many people, it starts to feel like going in circles, walking the same emotional path over and over, hoping each time around will somehow be different. If you've ever looked across the room at your partner and felt the unfamiliar weight of distance between you, like they're there, but not really with you, you're not alone. If you've held conversations in your head, planned your words, only to abandon them because the emotional effort felt too heavy, that too is a sign. Like the seasons, relationships shift. Some stay and evolve with us, while others come to teach us something, to reflect who we are or were, and then move on. When a relationship stops making space for your evolution, when it starts holding you back or dimming parts of who you are, it's not uncommon for your intuition to begin murmuring truths you don't want to admit, that this might be the end of a chapter. Carl Jung once said that what we refuse to face doesn't go away, it grows. And often, we cling to pain longer than we should, telling ourselves it's loyalty. But truth has a way of pulling at us, quietly but persistently, until we can't pretend anymore. Feeling emotionally disconnected, spiritually restless, or like joy has left the room doesn't mean you failed. It may simply mean the relationship has run its course. What follows in this video is a deeper exploration of the signs that a relationship has stopped moving forward, not to label it as broken, but to invite you into clarity, growth, and healing. Because sometimes the end of something isn't really an end at all, it's the start of coming back to yourself. It often begins unnoticed. Maybe a deep breath before speaking, or a sudden change in tone. The conversations repeat themselves in subtle ways, same conflict, different day. At first, it's easy to write off stress, timing, a rough patch, but eventually you come to recognize that you're stuck reliving the same emotional story on loop. Whether it's arguments about feeling valued, trusted, or heard, the themes keep cycling. You apologize, they apologize, you both try, you reconnect, but slowly, you end up in the same place again. And deep down, something starts to feel heavy, not just tired, but weary in your spirit. This isn't simply about having conflict, it's about being caught in an emotional maze, one where the exit seems just out of reach. Jung said our minds repeat unresolved experiences until we become fully conscious of them. That's why you keep circling the same emotional wounds, because some part of you still hopes they can be fixed, healed, or redeemed. But what if healing doesn't mean fixing it? What if growth means leaving the loop behind entirely? Imagine someone who constantly forgives their partner, not for grand betrayals, but for small, soul-numbing letdowns. He says he'll change, be more attentive, more present, and for a while, he is, but slowly, the silence creeps back. Each month starts with hope and ends with that same lonely ache. Why am I still not enough? Or the man who tiptoes around his partner's moods, trying to avoid setting her off. He works so hard to maintain peace, carefully choosing his words, but nothing ever seems to last. These aren't just hard moments, these are emotional loops dressed up as devotion. If you find yourself shrinking, dimming your light, softening your truth just to keep a relationship alive, you're no longer growing. And where there's no growth, there's only repetition. It's easy to think trying harder is noble, but true healing doesn't come from effort alone. It comes from honest recognition. Sometimes, the most powerful decision isn't staying to try again, it's stepping out of the cycle entirely. Peace doesn't live inside patterns that hurt you. It lives in the choice to stop reliving pain and start listening to what your soul has been trying to say all along. Asterisk. The same hollowness lingers quietly, like dust collecting on shelves no one touches anymore. It's as if you're renovating a house with a hidden fault in its very foundation. You repaint the walls, rearrange the furniture, swap out the curtains, but beneath it all, the cracks spread silently. Think of Danielle and Priya. They've been together for 14 years. After their second child, things began to shift in subtle, unspoken ways. Danielle signed them up for counseling, worked on his communication, and even started learning how to cook in the evenings. Priya kept a gratitude journal, meditated, and devoured books on relationships and emotional connection. When friends asked how things were, they responded with well-rehearsed, therapeutic phrases and cheerful smiles. But underneath, their bond had grown cold not through betrayal or explosive arguments, but through a creeping, expanding silence that neither of them could break. Despite all their efforts, what once felt effortless now resembled a carefully managed partnership. The more they tried, the more distant it felt, as though the heart of the relationship had slowly faded. Carl Jung once suggested that if practical efforts fail repeatedly, it's time to look deeper beyond appearances into the meaning beneath. Perhaps the relationship had already served its core purpose. Sometimes effort is noble, but when we focus only on surface repairs without addressing the underlying damage, we begin to deceive ourselves. We stay busy because stillness feels dangerous, but it is often in the quiet moments that the truth finally surfaces. You start to notice that your laughter doesn't feel natural, that your body tightens before even simple conversations, that the bed you share feels like a symbolic ocean separating to distant islands. The mind might call this failure, but the soul may recognize it as a necessary turning point. Something is asking to end so something else perhaps within you can begin. Continuing to force life into something that has lost its breath becomes a kind of quiet self-betrayal. It's draining. It's not love we're clinging to sometimes, but the idea of what love should look like. Pause gently and ask, what exactly am I holding on to? Is it connection or just the memory of connection? The answer calls for brutal honesty, softened by compassion. When a foundation is no longer solid, recognizing it isn't defeat, it's a deep loyalty to your own growth. Letting go becomes an act of courage, and in that pause, in that silence, you may begin to hear something new, something guiding you forward. Even if the direction leads away from what you've known, disconnection doesn't always arrive with fanfare. Often, it sneaks in quietly, like dusk falling on a room you didn't notice was losing light. You still move through daily routines together, grocery runs, shared calendars, short conversations. But the atmosphere has shifted. No dramatic fights, no betrayals, just a dull ache in the presence of someone who once felt like your entire world. You talk, they respond. You laugh, they offer a smile. But inside, you feel like you're speaking to someone who hasn't moved with you emotionally, like a statue frozen in time while you evolve. Elena, for instance, in her early 40s, found herself one night watching her husband from across the room. He was just scrolling through his phone, only a few feet away, but he felt miles removed. There had been no arguments, no cruelty, just an unbearable stillness. She realized she no longer spoke her dreams aloud, not because he'd dismissed them, but because she no longer believed he'd understand. She longed to be understood far more than to be touched. Jung once remarked that true loneliness comes not from solitude, but from the inability to share what truly matters to you. This quiet kind of emotional separation doesn't shout, it whispers. It lives in half-finished sentences, averted eyes, and postponed conversations that never find the right moment. Maybe you now share more with your diary than with your partner. Maybe you rehearse dialogues in your head only to stay silent, unsure of the point. The healing starts when you stop invalidating this ache inside you. It's not selfish to desire emotional depth. It's not betrayal to recognize you've been unseen for too long. Sometimes, it's not anyone's fault. It's just a slow drift in different directions, a growing misalignment, a soul quietly realizing it no longer fits in the emotional home it once knew. And as this space between you widens, questions rise, not from anger, but from sorrow. Are we still co-creating a life, or are we simply keeping a shell intact? Have we become familiar ghosts to one another, walking beside each other yet utterly alone? Real healing begins when you're brave enough to name what's been quietly breaking down, because no relationship can survive in silence if connection is lost. And if you're living in that silence, your heart may already be whispering the truth that your voice still fears to say. It's not a coldness that signals the end, it's an emptiness, and in recognizing it, you may finally start making your way back to the warmth within yourself. Growth often leads us in opposite directions, and we don't always see it coming. It's like walking through a forest together until, slowly, your paths start to diverge. At first, you're side by side, marveling at the same beauty. Then one of you lingers to explore a new flower, while the other rushes toward a distant view. You promise to catch up, you promise to wait, but little by little, the steps stop aligning. What once felt like a natural rhythm now needs planning, compromise, and eventually, strain. You tell yourself it's a passing phase, but deep down, something in you knows the path has split. Take Nora and David. They met in their 20s, full of shared passion and purpose. But over time, Nora gravitated toward introspection, art, and spirituality, while David focused on career advancement and community involvement. Their visions no longer overlapped. They kept trying date nights, check-ins, compromises, but something had quietly changed. They weren't wrong for growing. They were simply no longer growing in the same direction. And while effort matters, so does recognition. Sometimes, loving someone means accepting that the journey you started together is no longer the one you're meant to finish side by side. Holding on too tightly can hurt more than letting go. Eventually, we must ask ourselves whether we're fighting for love or just resisting the truth. And that truth, though hard, carries its own grace, because letting go of a shared path doesn't erase its beauty. It honors what it was, while making room for what's next. Asterisk. In the early years, they shared everything: music under starlit skies at festivals, dreams of seeing the world together, whispered promises by firelight. As time passed, those dreams branched into different lives. Nora found herself captivated by the rhythm of the earth. She started waking up before dawn to care for seedlings, attending soil science talks, and diving into sustainable farming with a passion that lit up her every word. David, on the other hand, thrived in the fast lane of the digital age. His world buzzed with pitch meetings, analytics, and late-night brainstorming over the future of marketing. At dinner, they still sat across from each other, but their words no longer intertwined. Nora lit up when talking about compost cycles and plant health. David came alive describing engagement metrics and growth strategies. Neither path was wrong, but they began to drift, each moving further into their own orbit. Carl Jung once said that becoming whole means growing into yourself, not into someone else. And that's where many relationships stumble, not from lack of love, but from lack of curiosity about the other's evolution. When growth becomes something you manage separately, not explore together, the space between grows silent. You stop turning to your partner for insight, and instead celebrate big wins with others who understand your current world. Intimacy starts to feel rehearsed, more like habit than heat. Healing doesn't start with blame, it begins with noticing the distance. It's natural to grow in different ways, but denying that divergence leads to hidden resentment. Ask yourself, does being with them inspire you to reach higher? Or do you find yourself dimming your enthusiasm to keep the peace? Do you still dream together, or just recall the dreams you once had? Sometimes we stay because it feels safer to cling to what's familiar than to face what might come next. But that choice can quietly turn love into obligation. When you realize that your connection is fueled more by memory than by momentum, you're standing at a threshold, and stepping forward might mean letting go, not out of anger, but with gentleness and deep respect. This realization often comes quietly, not with shouting, not with dramatic endings, but with a simple internal shift. One day, you're no longer rehearsing comebacks or asking the universe for more signs. You just begin to feel yourself gathering less your belongings, more your essence. You take with you what you've learned, who you've become, and all the hope you still carry. You begin, silently, to prepare for a new chapter. This shift can feel unexpected, especially for those who once feared endings with every fiber of their being. But something changes when you imagine leaving. Your chest doesn't tighten, it softens. You don't feel shattered, just steady. Not escaping, but emerging. Take Elena. She was a mother of two and a school counselor in a marriage that ticked all the boxes. Polite affection, shared schedules, even the occasional vacation. But inside, the connection had faded. What was once romance had turned into managing logistics. She wrote in her journal at night, wondering if this was all there would ever be. Then one day, folding laundry, she felt something unexpected. Not grief, not anger, just clarity. She wasn't trying to force it anymore. She wasn't waiting for the spark to return. It was as if her spirit had quietly stepped out of the old life. Before her mind caught up, Jung believed that when something no longer aligns with our true self, our inner energy starts to drift away from it even before we're consciously aware. You might notice yourself withdrawing, choosing quiet, or reaching for forgotten parts of yourself. It's not numbness, it's readiness. And that, perhaps, is the truest sign it's no longer about fixing what's broken. It's about honoring what was, and stepping with courage toward what could be. Crossing into a new phase of life isn't simple, it takes bravery. The familiar, even when painful, feels safer to the ego than the unknown. True release asks for more than just tears, it calls for deep respect for what once existed, and a willingness to let both yourself and the other person evolve freely. You're not turning your back on the past, you're recognizing that its role in your journey has concluded. A new chapter doesn't begin because you've rejected the previous one, but because your inner self is ready to welcome something more aligned. Readiness isn't a destination, it's the first courageous step into a new beginning. You move forward without fear, keeping only what nurtures your highest self. Letting go is often misread as weakness or escape, when in fact, it can be one of the most profound acts of love. It's not about deleting the past or pretending it meant nothing. It's about loosening the grip on something whose time has come to a natural end and allowing its memory to settle gently. Real forgiveness doesn't come from pretending we were never hurt, it's born from facing the pain, feeling it, learning from it, and choosing not to carry it as a burden into the future. For many, the most painful part of parting ways isn't the act itself, but what lingers. The regrets, the unanswered questions, the echoes of shared moments that refuse to fade. But when we step into emotional maturity, love transforms. It's no longer about ownership or forever. It becomes about honoring someone enough to let them leave your narrative, and loving yourself enough to write a new one. Think of Michael and Tara. After over 2 decades of marriage, they found themselves at a quiet turning point. There was no betrayal, no loud falling out, just an increasing distance they couldn't bridge. Tara, immersed in her spiritual path, found peace in stillness and introspection. Michael, steady and analytical, thrived in structure. They each tried to draw the other into their world, only to feel further apart. One night, sipping tea, Tara said gently, "I think we've walked together as far as we were meant to in this way." They wept, but in that moment, they truly recognized one another again. Carl Jung spoke of the journey toward becoming whole, that it often requires releasing old identities, even those shaped by love. When parting is done with honesty and kindness, it isn't destruction, it's a transition, a letting go that gives back. It isn't surrender, it's a sacred act of returning to who you are meant to be. It is choosing truth over pretending, evolution over regret, and inner clarity over clinging fear. You don't let go because the love vanished. You let go because the way you love has changed deeper. Braver, wiser, you begin to hear that quiet voice within, the one that whispers, "It's time." And that kind of farewell, it doesn't close a love story. It opens the door to a new one. With yourself, ***, a chapter draws to a close, much like the slow shift of a season, not with dramatic farewells, but with a quiet knowing that the air feels different, that the ground beneath you asks for something new. When you make the decision to walk away from a relationship that no longer resonates with who you're becoming, it's not surrender, it's a powerful affirmation of the person you've worked so hard to grow into. The past doesn't disappear, it stays as memory, as insight, as a complicated kind of love that still shaped your journey, where once you walked side by side. The road now opens into two paths. Each traveler is called to continue their own sacred exploration. Carl Jung once said that life is a constant dialogue between the person we were and the person we are becoming. And when we try to hold on to a story that no longer fits, our spirit resists it, grows weary, disconnected, and sorrowful. But if we learn to listen to those inner signals, what once felt like an ending becomes something entirely different, a beginning in disguise. Letting go of someone can create space for the parts of you that had gone quiet, passions you set aside, dreams you paused, truths you softened just to maintain peace. When you begin reclaiming these pieces, you begin living with greater honesty. And that honesty brings a quiet strength, the kind that steadies your breath and lights up your presence. This doesn't mean it won't hurt. Some mornings, you'll feel nostalgia like a soft tap on your heart. Some nights, the silence may feel louder than ever, but grief, when allowed to move through you, becomes like rain on dry earth. It nourishes what's been buried, making room for something living and true to emerge. And then, slowly, you'll begin to notice signs that you chose wisely, a sense of lightness in your steps, laughter that bubbles up without effort, creative energy returning, and new friendships that meet you as you are now, not as who you were trying to be. Think of a tree in autumn. It doesn't grieve its falling leaves. It releases them with trust, knowing spring will come. In the same way, letting go of a relationship that has reached its natural end is an act of faith in your own renewal. You are not rejecting your shared story. You are allowing it to enrich your future, like compost returning nutrients to the soil. Your past is now feeding the next season of your life, and from that fertile ground, new people will enter your world, those who resonate with the truth you now embody. New ideas, new directions, new stillness that finally feels like home. So as you step forward, carry this with you. An ending is not a loss, it's transformation. Bravery is the bridge between what was and what could be, and every goodbye spoken from love becomes the seed of a future hello. Trust the unfolding of your journey. Life doesn't take without offering something in return. It clears the way so you can meet the next version of yourself. Breathe deeply into that openness. Let it welcome you into a life that reflects your healing, your clarity, and your authentic self. And if these words stirred something inside you, don't stop here. The next chapter of healing, of growth, of real self-discovery is waiting. Join us, subscribe, turn on the notifications. Walk this path with a community that believes in truth, transformation, and wholeness. You are not walking alone. I'll meet you in the next step of this journey as we continue becoming who we were always meant to be.